Hello and welcome to Happy You Asked, the podcast where we explore a little thing called happiness, one awkward conversation at a time. And I'm your host, Erin Clare. I am joined today with me. I have with me, I already messed your name up. In my head, I have pre-messed it up, Raj. Raj Raghunathan. How was that?
You got it perfect.
Ooh, the stress of it, just I couldn't even use language. I was so stressed about getting it right. And it's because he is the H.E. Hart Fellow of the Southland Corporation Regent's Chair of Marketing at the McCombs School of Business at UT Austin. And he is interested in how people's judgments and decisions impact their happiness and fulfillment. Raj's work has appeared in top journals such as the Journal of Marketing, the Journal of Consumer Research, the Journal of Marketing Research, and the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. His work has also been cited in several mass media outlets, including The Atlantic, The New York Times, Fortune, Forbes, and Harvard Business Review. Raj's Psychology Today blog, Sapient Nature, has over 2.5 million page views, and his online course on employee happiness was rated as a top MOOC of 2019 and currently has over 10,000 students. His previous MOOC has over 500,000 students from 196 countries and was voted the top MOOC 4 years in a row. It's currently one of the top 250 MOOCs of all time. Oh, my employees would be thrilled if I had that. Ugh. Raj's book, If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Happy, has been translated into 13 languages and was featured in The Atlantic, Time, Guardian, Times of India, Live Mint, and Midday. Raj's TED Talk was viewed live on Star TV by over 17 million people worldwide. Welcome. It is such an honor and a pleasure to have you here, Raj.
Thank you, Erin. And you're the only person that read through my entire bio. Most people kind of like stop midway. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I even watched one of your TED Talks last night. I'm like learning.
Okay. Wonderful.
So I always ask every guest the same first question, and I know that you have very complex definitions of happiness, but if you could give one definition to our listeners and viewers, what would it be?
Okay. I think the most intuitive definition I've found is if you would rather not be somewhere else doing something else, then you're happy. If you're in this moment and you'd rather not be somewhere else and you're doing something and you're completely okay with that, even if it is a chore like washing dishes, but this is exactly what you want to be doing right now, I think you're happy. So that then makes it very broad. You could be angry at a customer service agent, but you feel like your anger is legit, and you want to restore fairness for yourself. That's fine. I mean, you're still at least not fragmented. You're not feeling bad about being angry. I would say that you're still happy. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it
The
does.
way that the researchers define it, though, is two ways. So if you're happy about your life, meaning to say that overall, when you take a step back and look at everything going on in your life, your career, your relationships, your health, and so on, and you're satisfied with all of those things, and if you're happy in your life, that is that right now, I don't have a headache. I am feeling good about everything that's around me. So it's both about kind of taking a step back and looking at the overall picture, what is sometimes referred to as reflective happiness, as well as when in this moment you're feeling good about everything, body wise, health wise, etc. That is sometimes called experienced happiness. So if both of those are positive, that is that when you step back and when you sink into the moment, and from both perspectives you're feeling good, then you could claim that you're happy.
It sounds so simple, but life is not the least bit simple because things are so annoying, Raj. They're so annoying. There's traffic, and then there's delays, and then we don't have enough money, or something's happening in our society that annoys us. Well, how do we navigate all that and still be happy?
It's a great question. I think one of the big, to me, determinants of being happy is when you put your best foot forward in any situation. And what I mean by that is that, of course, there's lots of things outside of our control that could be annoying, like you mentioned, traffic, the weather could be bad, you could be interacting with a person who's irritable, and so on and so forth. But if you're feeling really solid on the inside, that is, that you're feeling really healthy, you're feeling emotionally balanced, you have a lot of mental clarity, then I think that you're in the best position to deal with anything and everything that life throws at you at that point in time. And so I would say that that's the best preparation that you can have. It's almost like a shield that you carry with yourself, or a buffer. Right? You know, you have a lot of buffer between yourself and what's going on in the external world. And so that buffer can protect you from being affected negatively by all of those external circumstances. And what that in turn calls for is to lead a healthy lifestyle. You know, I think of healthy lifestyle as a foundation, and it's so important that it's the first thing that I always recommend to anybody who wants to prioritize their happiness. Um, Eat good food. And by now, I think that we have a pretty good, decent idea of what's good food. Avoid processed foods, avoid too much salt, avoid too much sugar, etc. Um, Sleep well. 7, 8 hours of sleep is non-negotiable on average every night or in a 24-hour period. And then move, you know, exercise a little bit, at least 4 or 5 days a week. Whatever form that you like doing it in. You know, if it's a sport, great. If you want to walk, that's also good. Take the dog for a walk, for example, or you know, more conventionally, people go to the gym. That's great. So if you make sure that you have a healthy lifestyle, then that is really a lot of the work done for you, you know. And then comes the uh, part about goals and how fast and how well you're progressing towards some important goals that all of us have. Most of us want to have great relationships, and that takes investing in them. And it needn't be boring. It needn't be thought of as an aversive activity, but you know, just setting time for hanging out with your friends and with your family, and calling people that yeah, you love, even if they live far away, and making sure that you're spending time nurturing those relationships is very, very important. And sometimes when we get busy with our lives, we tend to kind of sacrifice those. We don't go out on our vacations, or you know, hang out with our friends, or play a hobby, interact with somebody, etc. So relationships is a big goal. Another big goal we have is being good at what we do for work. And so progressing towards kind of mastery, I would say. So think of yourself as somebody that aspires to become really, really good at what you do. And most people have some clarity on what that means. And they can kind of, you know, look up to people who are role models for them to gain that clarity, and then break it down into, okay, what do I need to do now so that I can be really, really competent and acknowledged as a master in my domain in, say, 3 years or 5 years, right? And then progress toward it. And the third part is um, having a sense of internal control, I would say. And this has to do with recognizing that we have the ability to regulate our emotions. And no matter what happens in our life outside of our control, we have the ability to respond to that in a way that's healthier, or you know, more healthy than would be the case if we did not practice this, what I call internal control. And so that in turn requires us to become self-aware, recognize the ways in which things trigger us, and to try and come up with strategies for not kind of going down a vicious cycle when a triggering event happens, and instead either stay neutral, or ideally even kind of use those events to kind of learn and grow, and convert them into virtuous cycles if we can. And this part of internal control also includes meditation and mindfulness. So yeah, so if I were to kind of summarize all of this, I think that a foundation is leading a healthy lifestyle, which is very easy to understand for most people, which constitutes eating well, moving more, sleeping better. And then come the three big goals that, you know, for an MBA business school, as a mnemonic, I say MBA goals: mastery, belonging, and autonomy or control.
Ah.
So having a sense of internal control is what I talked about in under autonomy. And then the final kind of crowning glory of all of this, you know, the kind of like, if you were to imagine this to be a mansion, so you have the foundation of healthy lifestyle, and then the three MBA goals as the pillars, and then on the top, the roof is your attitude towards life. And if you can kind of um, nurture an attitude of abundance, meaning that if you can come up with a narrative along the lines of, I have everything that I need in order for me to be really joyous in this moment, right? And I don't think that this is something that somebody living in a war-struck zone or in the
Be more
slums.
joyous in the war-struck zone.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So, for those people, I would say that it's a little more difficult to do it. But for you and I, and I imagine for most of the people who are listening to your podcast, I think it should be possible for them to kind of like conclude that, look, if I cannot be happy really with everything that I have right now with my current situation, then really, for me to aspire to be happy when all of my problems are fixed is still probably not going to happen, So I have to decide right here, right now, that I'm going to be happy with what I have, and that then, uh, leads one to kind of like adopt this mindset of abundance, as I call it. So feeling like you have everything you need to be happy right now, and um, that in turn, means that we kind of are more focused on other people's problems and how can I solve them. It also means that we tend to follow things and pursue things that are intrinsically motivating for us. We don't prioritize fame or money and things like that. Instead, we prioritize things that are intrinsically enjoyable. And also, it means that we don't wait for other people to cooperate with us or behave differently for us to be happy. We are abundant inside of us, and we don't need the cooperation of the external universe to that extent in order for us to be happy. I hope all of this makes sense.
It does. It does. And it's interesting because as you were talking, I was going in my head, yeah, I'd like to, it's really easy to, get 7 hours unless you have a bunch of kids or something like that. And I'm arguing. Then the more I think about it, like, no, you're right. Because you really can't be until you find the ability to rest. It might be temporary, where it'll be more challenging for you. But when that challenge is passed, yes, that is one of the foundations you must have: good sleep, good habits for your body, and good habits for your mind to be able to deal with challenges. You're exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is your perspective really focuses on career and this idea that if we, are ambitious, we usually go towards the wrong things that will actually lead to our happiness. And it reminded me from a different perspective, like Dan Gilbert in Stumbling on Happiness goes about this from a sort of neuroscience perspective, but it's very similar to what you're talking about. We're chasing the wrong things.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you explain a little bit in brief for people who aren't familiar what you mean by, the ambition actually being our own sabotage?
Yeah. So I think one way to think about this is to think about it in terms of the need for superiority, as I call it. So
Hmm.
a lot of times um, we, and I even mentioned it a little bit earlier, that a lot of times the way that we seek to improve and become better at what we do is to emulate somebody who's better than us. We use them as role models, as inspiration, and things like that. And you got to be a little bit careful when you do that. Um, because it's very easy to fall into the trap of constantly comparing yourself to somebody else, and in particular engaging in what's called upward comparison. So you're seeking to emulate the success of somebody who's doing much better than you. On the one hand, it can really motivate us and give us clarity on what's possible, and therefore give us goal clarity, which is very important. On the other hand, though, emotionally speaking, it's probably going to make us feel insecure or jealous and envious when we compare what we have achieved with what somebody else has achieved. And so, what happens a lot of times is, particularly in the business world, and this is certainly true for my MBA students, is that they don't see how they can aspire to become better at what they do without comparing themselves to other people. So they kind of like, resign themselves to a situation where they feel like, yeah, I do need to become better at what I do, and I need to motivate myself to work hard and acquire skills. And the only way I know is to compare myself to other people and beat them at what they do. And I'm going to take the cost that it levies on me, namely that I'm going to feel insecure or jealous and envious, etc., as inevitable. In reality, though, there is another way to approach mastery and success, and that approach involves paying attention to what it is that you truly love to do, that you would anyway do, even if you were not being paid a lot of money for it, etc. Um, and try and see if you can incorporate more and more of that in your life as you go along. I'll give you my own example of this. So I'm a professor, as you know, of marketing at the Macomb School of Business, and marketing professors are expected to teach marketing courses like consumer behavior and things like that. And I've certainly taught that. I still continue to teach them. But at one point, I recognized that I was really deeply interested in the topic of happiness. And I also realized that, hey, this is a topic that's not generally kind of taught at business schools or research in business schools. But nevertheless, I was very, very interested in this. And that was a passion of mine. And I just said, you know what? It won't hurt me. It doesn't cost me anything to put together a syllabus. In fact, I enjoy the process of putting together the syllabus for it. And then I just gave it to my chair and just said, you know, I know I'm in the marketing department, but this is a course that it really kind of like speaks to me at a very deep level. And I think that the students would benefit from taking a course on what it takes to lead a happy and fulfilling life. And he said, I love the topic, but let's see what the dean's office says. And one of the good things about being in a business school is that, you know, it's a free market economy. And so the dean's office looked at it and said, you know what, we can't see a kind of direct connect between this course and the business school, but maybe the students will like it. Who knows, you know? So let's just offer it and see what happens. But they did tell me that, look, we do need a minimum number of people to sign up for it. You know, it's got to be at least 15 people. So we'll give it a go, teach it for 2 years and see what happens. And even the very first time I taught it, Erin, there was a waiting list, believe it or not. So it just seemed to be a topic that was very appealing to the business students, which was like really kind of mind blowing to a lot of people because everyone thought, you know, business school students, they want to make money, they want to be famous, they want to climb up the corporate ladder. Happiness is not something that's, you know, central to them, and they're not going to find this topic to be of relevance. But in fact, it turned out to be not the case, you know, so they were very interested in it. So all of this to say that whatever job you have, surely you can think about small, little incremental ways in which you can nudge your job toward things that you find more meaningful, you find more fulfilling, you find more closer to your intrinsic interests. Yeah, and so if you can kind of like, you know, ask your boss or ask your team, hey, can I do this project in this particular way, or can I, you know, try and um, do something that is more aligned with my core interests. Um, you'd be surprised. A lot of times, the bosses or the leaders of the team will be like, "Yeah, sure, you know, why don't you give it a go?" Or they might give you feedback that, you know, is not exactly what you wanted to do, but closer to what you wanted to do than what you're doing currently. And this area, by the way, this concept is called job crafting. So
Ah,
there's been research on this, yeah, job crafting. And so you job craft as you go along. You don't need to kind of like quit this job and open a, you know, mom and pop restaurant that you've always aspired to do. You know, that'd be too discontinuous a jump from what you're doing to what you want to do. But if you job craft, you're kind of subtly moving your job in the direction of your interest. Then fast forward that 3, 4, 5 years, you might end up doing something that's totally different from what you're currently doing, but much more aligned with where you want to be good at, you know, what kind of some skills and mastery you want to seek. And so this is a very different approach from the one that I described earlier, which most of us assume is the only way to go about becoming better at what we do, which is engaging in these social comparisons. And so you're still being ambitious, but the ambition is closer to what you're truly deeply interested in rather than the ambition anchored on how other people are doing and seeking to emulate their success. When you do that, you're kind of like handing over the keys to your happiness to the external world. You know, it's very, very difficult to, uh, you know, control, and it's not in your hands whether you're going to be the numero uno in whichever field that you choose, right? Whereas with the approach that I'm talking about, at least you're doing things that are intrinsically motivating for you. And so you're going to enjoy the process much, much more. And in fact, what the research shows is that you're much, much more likely to be successful and, you know, check off the box or the goal of becoming a master of what you do, much more likely to do it if you follow your intrinsic interests than if you're only pursuing fame, power, money, status, etc. I hope that makes sense.
Raj, you're going to love this because I am an example of all the things you just said.
Oh, wonderful.
Well, yeah. So I am by trade an English professor. But after I did my stuff, studied my literature and got tenure, then I was like, I want to study happiness and crafted the job and then aligned that with, well, how does happiness, got a course, taught it, very successful, then aligned that with how does happiness work within higher education and the jobs
Mm,
there. And that's
wonderful.
long story later, kept job crafting until I have my job now as a dean across the country. So yes, you are 100% right. That is exactly how it works the best. And I think at least my students, and I can't speak for the world, but I know in the US, people don't honestly know what they want to be. They know that
Mm.
they want to be successful. And like you said, that's the model that they see.
Yeah.
Yes, you can only be happy and successful if you focus on what is it that I am good at and want to do. And that's the part that is people leave out. What do you want to do? And I think as leaders, too, it's also important that then we see what people are good at and we
Yeah.
lead them towards that
Yeah.
and not towards things they're not good at.
Yeah.
It's obvious, but for any sort of structure, doing that makes so much more sense because then people are happier and they do better at it. So
Okay.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree and confirm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
this one, I mean, you raised an important point there, Erin, in all of this, which is that in the US, a lot of us do not even know what we're good at or what we like to do. And I think that our education is generally very, very good at training people to gain skills. But this fundamental question of what is it that people ought to be doing for the rest of their life, and starting with the assumption that they'd be happier, they'd be more successful if they do something that they like to do and enjoy doing and are also good at it. When you start with that assumption, then we don't really kind of like tackle that topic head on, and we leave it to the career services who may or may not, be very good at this because they get a lot of demand during the interview season, etc. We don't really have a systematic course-based approach to help people identify what they're good at, and so what I suggest is that they kind of like keep a journal and write in it what sorts of things that they think they're going to be good at and also enjoy doing. And it's like peeling the layers of the onion. Oftentimes what we initially come up with when we start to kind of maintain a journal like that is things that have been put into our head by our mentors, our teachers, and everything. And so you might say that, yeah, I think that I'm really good at being a consultant, and that's what I would enjoy doing. Until they discover that, oh my goodness, this involves like, working 80-hour weeks and traveling a lot and away from family and so on and so forth. And then they realize that, what, those are not things that enhance my happiness levels. And so even though I might like the core job itself, everything else that comes with it seems like it's not something that I would enjoy. And so you got to kind of like become self-aware and then go out in the world and do the thing that you think that you might like, and then come back and ask yourself, was I correct in my assumption that I'm going to like it? And then, revise that and so on. And so you got to be patient. You got to give yourself a little bit of time and then engage in this job crafting that we talked about. And so if you
I
do a combination of those things, I think that it's more likely to lead you toward things that you end up really liking.
I think too people and it's only seem to understand jobs in terms of what already exists rather than jobs just collections of skills. And
Mm,
so some people are very good at leading others. They just are, they know how to get a job done and
mhm,
see a big picture. Other people are very good working in teams. Other people need to be alone and work and research in a combined, like a very structured, individual way. But people say, okay, I can do that, but they don't know how to put that then on something that already exists. And one of the
mm,
confusing things is our industry, the employer, it's always moving and shifting. So really, if
mm,
you think, what skills am I good at?
yeah,
And then, do I want those skills close to home or do I want to travel? And you start being able to think, well, how can I use these in a way that makes me excited every day? And
yeah.
that's confusing when you're creating a future too that doesn't exist.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. My job didn't exist, right? I mean, there's very, very few people out there teaching a course on happiness in the business school when I started, which was like almost 20 years ago. And likewise, if you think about almost any job that exists, somebody created it at some point. That job didn't used to exist before that came along, including like being a drummer. The drum set did exist, 1,000 years ago, right? Somebody created it. And so you have to, I think most people have to recognize that the job that's going to be ideal for them currently doesn't exist. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
have to co-create it with the cooperation of the universe, obviously, but they have a big role to play in that too. And where they end up eventually, that is going to be the most satisfying for them is going to be a job that did not exist. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, can you give some practical advice from your own life, like a Tuesday afternoon example of how you navigate happiness and don't fall into like those spirals or rabbit holes of bleh. Uh,
hmm Yeah. Okay. So here's a very, very important thing that I've used as a guiding principle for myself, Erin. So I divide the goals that I have in my life into two kind of subsets. And okay, one set of goals, I call them outcome goals. And so these are goals like I want to have good results when I go for my annual blood test. I want to have my triglycerides at a certain level, my LDL cholesterol, and so on and so forth at a certain level, and so on and so forth. And also, I have goals in terms of my relationships. I want my family to be safe, feel safe and happy, and feel that I support them toward their goals. Career-wise, I have certain goals. I want a certain number of papers published every year. I want to get certain kinds of teaching ratings in my classes and so on and so forth. Okay, those I call outcome goals, and they're usually quantifiable, not always, but you can usually quantify them. And then the second set of goals, I call them process goals. And these are goals that are needed in order for me to achieve my outcomes. For example, if I want my blood work to come out well, then I need to eat healthy. I need to exercise. I need to get better sleep. I need to take my supplements. I need to take my medication, and so on and so forth. And so all of these are process goals. And so what I try and do is that I tether my happiness and my emotionality to the achievement of the process goals and not as much to the achievement of the outcome goals.
mm, mm,
So in the end, when my results come out, and let's say the blood work turned out to be not so good, not as well as good as I expected, of course I'm going to feel a little bit of an emotional jolt there. I'm going to feel a little bit bad, but I try and uh, take my mind away from that. And this is where a little bit of the mindfulness practice and meditation, etc., come handy because a big part of mindfulness is focusing on what you want to focus on and not focusing on things you do not want to focus on. And so it gives you that ability to compartmentalize and be able to take your mind away from things that you do not want to pay attention to. But for the moment, let's leave that aside. The idea is to tether your emotional life to the achievement of the process goals rather than to the achievement of the outcome goals. The outcome goals, usually, especially if they're lofty, tend to be long drawn out, take several months, and also are going to depend on the cooperation of the universe. If I happen to be traveling a lot in those 3 months before my blood test, and I just happen to be in areas where good food is not available, right? I'm like eating bad breakfast food at the hotels, and there's no gym there, and I can't really exercise. It's out of my control. And so my blood work is not going to turn out that great, even though I've tried my best to stick to the outcome goals, sorry, to the process goals as much as I can, right? So yeah, so outcome goals tend to be less in your control than are the process goals. And so the idea is to give yourself a pat on the back so long as you've been diligent in sticking to the process goals. And I give myself a little bit of treat if I end up kind of sticking to the process goals. I get a massage or take a break. Try and make those treats healthy rather than unhealthy. So I try and tether my emotions to the achievement of the outcome goals rather than to the achievement, sorry, to the process goals, sorry, rather than to the achievement of the outcome goals. And so when you go back to your question on Tuesday afternoon, things are blah, things are not going well. What usually that means is what that translates into is that I haven't been able to achieve my outcome goals. I thought this meeting would go well, it did not go well. I got an email saying that my paper's been rejected at a journal, right? So it's blah because I haven't achieved those outcome goals. But if my emotionality is mostly tethered to my achievement of process goals, the process goals are in my control. Can I still go to the gym despite all of these things happening? Can I still be a good supportive family member even though, bad things are happening in my life? And if I'm able to do those things, and can I still come back at home and then write in my journal and do my little prayer and my meditation session before I go to sleep? Then I've, done everything that was in my control that I could do. In fact, I feel a sense of pride at the end of the evening that despite life throwing its, worst curveballs at me, I've managed to stick to what I wanted to do today, on my things to do list in terms of my process goals. And so, in other words, I mean, in summary, the idea is to kind of like emphasize the process of how you want to lead your life, and do your best with regard to that and leave the rest. you know I hope that makes sense.
It does. Do you ever just let go though and like screw all my process goals? I'm gonna veg out with some ice cream and watch some movies. Do you do that?
Yeah, so I think that on occasion you got to kind of give yourself a little break, and those days though, hopefully are not very common. And I think what happens is, at least with me, this has been my experience, is that if I have good outcome goals, and what I mean by that is that these are goals that are relatively achievable. I'm not kind of like aiming for the moon, right? They are realistic. At the same time, they're stretch goals. They're not like easily achievable. And the outcome goals are good outcome goals from the viewpoint of others and society. I'm not trying to kind of cheat other people, or, being too greedy in terms of what these outcome goals are. Then what I've discovered is that if I really emphasize the process goals, in the sense that, I tie my emotionality to the achievement of the process goals, it just enhances the chances that I achieve those outcome goals in the end. And
Mm,
what happens as a result of achieving the outcome goals is that even though I'm trying not to, base my emotional life on the achievement of the outcome goals, when you do achieve them, you do feel a wave of positivity. When you get the teaching award, or, you publish a paper, certainly there is this, huge sense of joy. And that joy in turn then kind of makes it more likely that you're going to re-engage with the process goals, because it gives you that little bit of wind in your sails, and you feel like, yeah, I did it. And then that just makes it more likely for you to kind of redouble your efforts in terms of the process goals. So in other words, there's a saying in English, right? Nothing succeeds like success. And so, it just kind of re-emphasizes, it becomes a virtuous cycle. And so those cheat days, when you say, screw it all, I'm just going to, like, veg out and I'm going to eat a whole bucket of ice cream, those become, less probable, I would say, in life. That said, there are certainly times like that. And I do sometimes, I just say, what, I'm just going to have like a couple of glasses of wine today. And if it becomes 3 glasses, that's fine too. And this is what today's going to be. I'm not going to write in my journal. I'm not going to do my mindfulness session. I'm just going to have one of those days where, I'm just going to just chill. Yeah.
we need those too. You
Yeah.
know,
100%.
yeah, and then all this, you're exactly right, in my opinion, about what you're talking about with happiness. I think one of the big challenges that we see is the people who we hold up in the United States as the most successful usually are the meanest people, and they're not people we should emulate as far as their behavior. You know, when you're seven deadly happiness sins, they basically do all of them.
Mhm.
And yet we hold them up as, these are the most important people who should be talked about the most. It's really hard then for people to understand happiness as a goal and not that. What are your
Mm.
thoughts?
Yeah, I think, and I actually kind of disagree with you a little bit.
Oh,
I
good, I'm
think that,
glad.
yeah, I think that the one second. Um, So I agree that there are with you that there are a lot of people who are in leadership positions that are mean, vicious. They're not good examples of the kinds of qualities that I've talked about in my book that enhance happiness levels, for sure. But there are also, by the same token, lots and lots and lots of other leaders and people in positions of power and status, and we look up to them, who do, in fact, um, showcase these characteristics that are happiness enhancing. And I think that it's easy to kind of like lose sight of those people when the first category of people who are the kind of like mean people hog the limelight, and
Yes,
they're in the
yes.
news all the time. Um, but this is where I think to some extent our discipline comes into the picture. If you truly wanted to be happy and you prioritized it, I think that you would also recognize that it's very, very, very important to shield yourself from negativity and scarcity oriented news. And you should reduce the exposure to those kinds of um, uh, news items and stimuli. And so, in other words, there's lots of people out there who are positive people who are emulating some of these characteristics that I talked about in my book. So yeah, so that's what I would say. And I say this also on the basis of research. Adam Grant came out of the kind of spectacular book about 10 years ago on give and take, it's called. And the idea is that, givers, people who are compassionate, who are kind, and etc., are the ones who end up succeeding much more
Hmm.
than people who are takers. Yeah, so I recommend the book. You should take a look at it. And so this idea that people who end up becoming successful are generally meaner, generally bad, etc., and self-centered, it's not true. It turns out it's not true. Okay. It's interesting that a lot of us believe that to be the case, and it could be because we tend to remember those people more, and that
Yeah.
might have to do in turn with something called negativity
Negative
bias.
bias. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but in reality, the correlation between being mean, self-centered, etc., and success is negative. It's the people who are kinder to other people, who are compassionate, etc., who tend to succeed. And when you kind of look into the data, it actually makes sense as to why that is the case. Who would you rather promote, Erin, right? If you have two people who are more or less equally skilled, but one of them is just a kinder, nicer person and is generally positive and cooperative, or another person who you know to be self-centered, etc., right? If they're more or less equal in terms of skills, you'd rather promote the first person, right, who's kinder. And so you kind of like multiply that over many years and across different sets of people and organizations, then you would expect that the people who are kinder, of course, skills are very important, right? So you can't kind of compensate for lack of skills through just being kind and compassionate. But so long as you're in the ballpark of having the requisite skills in order to do a job, then you're more likely to be promoted if you're a kinder person, which is what he finds across medical disciplines, law, sales jobs, and so on and so forth. It's the people who are generally good to other people who are promoted into positions of leadership.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And also, um, it's about that going towards what you want, as you said. So even in what we consume and who we admire, if we go towards what we want rather than what we don't want, right, we're going to be healthier. So by focusing on those people who are negative and reading more about them, it does not help us on our
Yeah.
own goal. Yeah.
No, no, no. Yeah, it's a very, very important, but most people don't have the discipline and or the self-awareness to recognize how much our emotional life is dependent on the stimuli that we're exposed to. So I think at a conceptual level, people understand it, right? Because they realize that what we feel is going to be hugely affected by the activities in which we enjoy or the people we hang out with, etc. But it's also true that our emotional life is and how we feel is affected by the news we read and the movies we watch and the books we read, etc. And so, if you really wanted to prioritize your happiness, it might come down to not looking at the news that often. Really, I mean,
Oh,
taking
I,
these
I
news.
advocate that.
Yeah, there is actually a paper that came out in 2017 on this very idea in the British Journal of Psychology, I think it was, which showed that the more you expose yourself to the news, the worse you feel. And so the reason why a lot of people still go and look at the news is because they feel like they cannot be misinformed or they cannot be uninformed. But really, I mean, I don't think that there's too much of a danger in this hugely kind of social media world that we live in, that you're not going to get to know what's going on. You're going to get to know one way or the other. Other people are going to text you about it or whatever. So you don't need to do anything extra in order to kind of like look at the news. And I think that the absolute worst thing you can do is wake up, and as soon as you wake up in the morning, you look at the news.
Yep.
Try not to
Oh,
do.
God, absolute worst thing. I mean, why would you start your day that way? It's not like it's going to be a bounty of good information that will make you feel good.
Exactly.
No, you're 100%. This has been amazing. We're coming towards the end of our time, and I just
Mhm.
have two final questions for you. One is everybody gets to add a song to the playlist that's on here. So, do you have a song you would like to add? It can be any song.
Mm, okay. So this is a song which promotes this abundance mindset. And it's called How Lucky Can One Man Get? um,
Okay.
by um, these two wonderful singers who are, sorry, there's a little bit of disturbance on the outside. I don't know if it came through, but
No, no, can't hear it.
good, good, good. Yeah, so it's, hang on just a minute. I always forget the names of these two gentlemen. Um, uh, it's by John Prine,
Oh, yeah.
and but the version of the song that I like is actually one that he sang with another guy. Um, Kurt
Okay.
Weill and John Prine.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, that'll get added. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners about happiness?
Um, I final thoughts. Okay, so I think that one thing that is very helpful I found is to have a exercise or a thing that you can do. You can call it a process goal to help achieve this outcome goal of nurturing this abundance mindset, and that is to maintain what's called a three good things journal. Um, so every day, and it's best done at the end of the day when you're ready to go to sleep, and so you kind of like had a bunch of experiences and things happen during the day. You kind of recall everything that happened during the day, and then write about three things that were positive, and focus on things if you can, positive things that you did not earn. In other words, you did not have a role to play in them. So these are things that should really evoke the sense of gratitude in you, that I did not even work towards it, and so you come out of that exercise feeling a sense of gratitude toward life, for helping you experience these positive outcomes. And so it could be something small, like you lost a pair of glasses and you thought they were lost forever, and then all of a sudden your dog kind of like brought it to you, right, from under the sofa. Maybe it just stuck there for a while, and the dog kind of managed to find it. Or it could be that you ran into an old friend at a farmer's market. So these are things that you did not work towards. So things that you work towards could be that you earned a promotion or a bonus, or praise from the boss or what have you. So try to focus on things that the universe is providing to you rather than things that you earned. And so what that does is that it over time changes your narrative about the world. Most of us, even if we don't recognize it subconsciously, either hold the narrative that the universe is benign and good things happen to me, life has my back, or we end up subscribing to the opposite end of the spectrum, a belief of the universe being malign, and if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong, and I always get screwed at the end of the day, kind of a thing. And so, for obvious reasons, you're likely to be much happier if you entertain the idea that the universe is benign. And so, how do you kind of like nurture that belief? And one of the ways to do it is to engage in this three good things journaling, where you're writing about three non-egotistical good things that are happening on an everyday basis. And it's a very subtle but beautiful change. If you continue the practice for about 6 months, is what I've discovered in my experiments, people walk away feeling this sense of, what a guy called Chade Meng Tan in his book, Search Inside Yourself, he calls it non-energetic joy. That is
Mm.
that you don't have to expend any energy at all to feel the sense of upliftment and joy inside of you. And that you're suffused with that feeling after a little bit of time. You don't even realize, why am I feeling this joyful? There's no reason to feel good, but still I'm feeling this sense of joy. And that happens to you more and more as you engage in this journal over a longer period of time. 6 months is I think the minimum that you need to be engaging with it in order to feel that.
I love that idea of, the ritual of it. In a similar vein, what I do is it has to be more immediate for me. So whenever I get in sort of a little bit like, I'm like, see
Mhm.
beauty right now.
Yeah.
And so I will look, one of the things I make sure if I'm flying, always look out the window because those are the clouds beneath me. It's amazing. Look outside. The sun's glorious, right?
Uh-huh.
The green of the leaves. Immediately see beauty, and that's that no expense joy, right?
Mhm.
Reminder that we live in a miraculous, incredible, amazing world.
100%.
And yes, and so if it's at night, and for me it has to be like right now, see it now, and then I feel better, and then return that gratitude. Either way, I feel, I agree completely. That's exactly what you have to do.
Wonderful.
Raj, you made me happy being here. You really
Thank
did.
you. Yeah, yeah. I had a lot of fun in this conversation as well. And once again, I apologize for coming in a little bit late
Oh,
in the morning.
it's all right. Doesn't matter. You have a
All right.
wonderful day, and thank you. I'll be reaching out to you, okay?
All righty. Take care, then.
All right,
Take care.
bye.